Hi, I've just read out the paper, November 2012, 0522, the one regarding Julia and her parents in Ecuador, South America. What I'm going to do now is just talk through some of the points on the examiner's report for this paper to help you understand generally how to answer a question 1, 2 and 3 and to get it right. For best impact, I would recommend that you visit the website. I've put the link up on the video and have a look at these papers so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. What it says is that you need to make sure that you both, for question 1 particularly, explicitly understand facts and ideas and refer to them. Secondly, that you have an implicit understanding, which means you can read between the lines and understand feelings and connotations, associations of ideas in the text. And thirdly, that you cognitively understand the meanings of words. That's most clearly tested in question 2, but is also tested throughout the paper by asking you to use different vocabulary that has the same meaning. If you use different vocabulary, but the meaning shifts, you'll be marked down. You won't be getting a B or an A because you're not sufficiently aware of what you're doing with the language. Now, it does point out on the examiner's report that 20% of the marks are for writing. For questions 1 and 3, there are 5 marks allocated each for writing. For example, on question 3, should you think, well, can only write a side, but I've got really small writing, I'll squeeze it all in, I'll write loads and loads and loads, or even if you write a page and a half or more for question 3, it does actually say in the examiner's report that some people who wrote excessively long answers scored 0 marks for writing. And it also points out, again about question 3, that even where responses were over the length requirement, so even where they wrote lots in order to try and get their 15 marks for reading, they rarely gained all 15 marks and they lost the 5 writing marks. And it's important as well to realise, as it says in this report, that this was the highest scoring question for many of the candidates. This is where you're going to pick up the most marks. A brief reminder perhaps at this point, what I've been advising my classes is the time allocation for each part of the paper. You should spend about 10 minutes, depending on how fast you are at reading. You might need to spend up to 15. In fact, you probably can spend up to 15, reading through passage A, reading the question 1, and highlighting for question 1. All right, and you may need to spend a little bit more time reading again for question 2 for the 2 paragraphs. And then you should spend about 50 minutes, 50 minutes, planning and answering question 1. And then you move on to question 2. You can allow yourself about 20 minutes for question 2, and you should actually write about a side and a half. And then finally, you'll need to do a little bit more reading, which you squeeze in somewhere for passage B. And for question 3, you should allow yourself 30 to 40 minutes. Bearing in mind, you must leave time for question 3, as there are so many marks. But let's come back to question 1. And what it does say is that you need to make sure that you include all 3 bullet points, all right, and development of ideas. Now, the question asks you to write an interview from Julia's parents' point of view. What it says is that you need to include the following. I'll just remind you. Why did you choose to visit the rainforest in Ecuador with your daughter, Julia? How did Julia's accident happen? What did she do to survive? And what are your thoughts and feelings towards the EQR people and their way of life? Now, what it points out in the examiner's report goes in quite a lot of detail through the answer. It says that you need to infer, you need to use quite a lot of association to realise, for the first bullet, what might make them choose to visit the rainforest. It says they're biologists. It says that there are 500 species of birds in the rainforest alone, and it's one of the few remaining places where the Chua people are actually living in relationship with the rainforest and know it intimately, and they've survived. So there's a lot there that we can draw on to answer the first bullet. Now, you're answering from the point of view of the parents. You can choose to have Mum answer all 3 questions, Dad answer all 3 questions, or to have them kind of both answering, or maybe dad answering one, mum answering, and then dad answering the last, or the other way round. You can mix up the answers. What you mustn't do is have Julia answering the questions. That would show you haven't read the question properly. What you also need to think about, the second point, how did Julia's accident happen? What did she do to survive? It talks on the examiner's report about people making up encounters with monkeys and snakes. And also it talks about lifting whole phrases from the passage. So you've got to avoid that. In the second bullet, you've got to pick details out, but don't put them in the same order as the original text. Now, the final point, what are your thoughts and feelings towards the Achua people and their way of life? Some candidates said, oh, it's really difficult to live like this, how awful for them, how terrible, how primitive. What you've got to remember is that you're writing as Julia's parents. Julia's parents must have felt incredibly guilty that they subjected her daughter to this. She went missing and they lost her, and they had a hunt for her, and they got the Achua people hunting for her as well. It's only thanks to the Achua people's kindness, generosity, and knowledge that their daughter is still alive today. So they would be feeling massively grateful towards the Achua people. Now, not only that, they probably were well disposed towards them because they're interested in biology, they're interested in anthropology, which is how people live and how primitive societies function. Remember, nowadays, a lot of people are valuing primitive societies much more than they're used to. They're recognizing the wisdom of living in balance with nature and not destroying natural habitats, and how much there is to gain, how many medicines and things of value are in those natural habitats, keeping our provision of natural resources up as well. So there are all sorts of reasons why the parents would be feeling grateful towards the Achua people and hugely respectful. Look at the last line of the passage. The family had found what they'd always been looking for. So you need to empathise with the parents. Not every question one will ask you to be hugely empathic, but this question one clearly does. You're writing an interview, and the interviewers will want that emotional warmth and that emotional response. If I were writing this myself, I would get mum to answer one of those sections and make it more emotive, but also informed as well. Question 2 asks you to analyse, and I'll just read you some of the summary points on the examiner's report. It advises you not to write out whole sentences when you're quoting, but also don't not only give one word if it's part of a descriptive phrase. It also says to reread the whole paragraph before making selections, and I do advise you to reread it to look at any repeated ideas or effects going through. I was looking at the Chinese wedding paper with a student the other day, and as we looked at it in a bit more detail, we noticed, first of all, it compared the church to a barn, but secondly, it kept on coming back to the idea of damp, with and even livestock being there and dripping in water, and we could see there's a whole semantic field going on of dampness and general unpleasantness. You don't notice that if you don't reread. Choose the best features, not the ones which just come first, to comment on. Don't make comments such as, the writer makes you feel as if you're really there. This is a brilliant piece of writing, or this is a very descriptive phrase. The writer uses descriptive words here which make you see things in your head. All those kind of gushy, waffly comments indicate that you're not really thinking about the language. Try to be specific in the effect. What it says here is, try to think of what you might see or feel or hear when you're reading the word or phrase. What are the connotations and associations of the language? Don't be afraid to draw on your own experience. Now, I've already talked about question 3 a little bit. You do need to be clear and to the point in question 3. I think an important point which is made here is to avoid long explanations. Also, to do not write introductory statements to your question. Don't generalize about the holiday in the Kalahari or generalize about the problems in the rainforest, but go straight in with specific problems and specific features of the holiday. Where you can see that points link up because they just make sense together, group them together. Don't just go through the passage chronologically, as it were. So, for example, in passage A, the insects and leeches should be put together because they're similar. And in passage B, the hunting expedition goes logically with being taught how to track and to make weapons. I would just say before I close that having looked at a couple of my students' work, really important if you're writing a journal entry for question 1, that you write it in the past tense. Don't write it as a story which is happening as you speak. Make sure you get the genre of the form right. If you're unsure about it, I would seriously recommend that you perhaps go onto GCSE Pod and look at the different genres being described there, or that you read some examples of different genres, because you're going to lose marks if you can't write in the right form, and also, of course, with the right voice. For question 2 and 3, make sure you give equal effort to both sections of the question. You will not gain top marks if your second section on any of them is less effort. It just suggests that you didn't schedule your time appropriately. For question 3 as well, another point I just observed as I was looking at your work is that you need to keep your answer simple. Aim to be comprehensive. Keep looking through the passage and think, what are the key points here? Have I missed any of them? I'm going to add one on, because you're going to get your marks, most of your marks, for the number of points that you make. I think that's it. Good luck.